Brian Cotty. He is actually joining us today far from the office. He was actually planned to be out of town and has graciously taken some time to speak with you guys today. He is from Stenstrom Companies. And where are you now? You're in San Diego, right, Brian?
Yes, I'm in San Diego, actually, for the week.
All right. Cool. Thank you so much for being here.
If I look a little red in the face, Emily, it's not your monitor. Your tech is working fine. It's just too much sun.
Having a little too much fun in the sun. Well, that's, I'm glad that we could keep you indoors for at least 30 minutes.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to turn it over to you. So you have power to, I don't think he's going to jump into product. You guys have been in product a lot today. But I can allow you to scoot through your couple of slides on your own as you speak. But the floor is all yours.
Okay. So my name is Brian. I have been the director of IT at Stenstrom Companies for about 15 years. I've been in some capacity involved in technology in the construction industry for 20 years. Lifelong resident of Rockford, Illinois. Began at Stenstrom in 2005. At that point in time, we had about 65 users and 2 servers, and now we're up to about 230 IT users, and well into the double digits of virtual machines and close to the double digits in physical servers. So our environment over the past 15 years has grown exponentially, and a large part of that, and part of the reason I agreed to share my experience with Core today, is we were able to take eForms through Core Cloud Solutions and a few other applications that they offer, and integrate those into some of our processes that have been relatively untouched by IT for a few years. And that might sound familiar. You may have certain groups of employees, for instance, guys on site or remote users that aren't heavily integrated into your IT systems. Stenstrom is a family-owned company. And although we've grown in the past 65, 70 years, from a small general contractor to a company with 5 divisions, including a GC, excavation, blacktop division, a few service divisions. We've become very involved in the petroleum industry to the construction and service side. We still operate as kind of a small business. And the purpose behind that, or the reason behind that, is because we have 5 divisions, all of which are less than 75 employees. And so it's kind of a unique environment at Stenstrom. And that is why Core Cloud Solutions seem to be such a good fit. IT in the small and the medium-sized business sector is just handled very differently than in the enterprise. In the small and medium-sized business sector, your technical resources are a little bit more limited. You may not even have a full-time IT person on staff. And so you have to be able to tap into resources that maybe offer, both in terms of personnel and skill sets, but also software functionality, offer a little bit of flexibility or maybe even a lot of flexibility. And that is what we found with CCS, Core Cloud Solutions. We found that the system itself was highly flexible. If you were listening to Gary speak a few minutes ago, he mentioned the entry cost into the solution is dependent on the applications that you use, how many users. But then he also mentioned customization. And customization is for IT in the SMB sector, it's a big deal. Once you get more to the enterprise and the larger companies, they tend to take a software system and make their workflows and their resources, their people, their business processes fit those workflows. And that's really, really natural for companies that size. They have the ability, they have the skill set. And the smaller business, especially in construction, what ends up happening is you have people that have been there for 10 years and they wear multiple hats and they do multiple things. And they've got a decade or 20 years of experience with these workflows and these business processes, allow them to wear these multiple hats and do so pretty well. Unfortunately, the downside to that is that a lot of times those processes, because they just seem to work, they fly under the radar a little bit as far as improving efficiency, improving the process or the workflow, adding efficiencies. And we started about a decade ago looking at these types of processes. Invoice approval, AP, time entry, payroll. A lot of these processes, of course, that are super inefficient involve accounting, involve to some extent costing, especially when you're talking about a smaller or a medium-sized general contractor. And so we started with Core by implementing TimberScan. That was, as I said, in 2010. That was quite some time ago. Really what we wanted to do is we wanted to find a system that was flexible enough to change a few really critical problems that we have. One was the issue of it was very inefficient. The invoice approval and entry process involved a lot of keying in, scanning documents one by one. Who needs to approve this invoice? Why hasn't a check been cut? Where is the process stuck at right now? There was always a little bit of push and pull there. Additionally, the company, Stenstrom, was at a point where they were starting to migrate into the next generation of ownership. And so there's always a question of how do we take the knowledge base of previous generations or as employees move on in this market, how do we ensure that that knowledge base for a work process or a specific duty is translated or transitioned to the next person? And one of the ways to do that is to build an IT system where that knowledge base, instead of residing in the head of just a single individual, it's inherent in the process. And so we started with invoice approval. And it was a great step forward for our accounting department. We've been using TimberScan for about 10 years. I think one of my favorite things about TimberScan at this point is we've used it for 10 years, and boy, we've got some of these processes really nailed down as far as getting them as efficient as we can. At the same time, we're only scratching the surface of what TimberScan can do. It's only been within the last year that we've started looking at AIM, which is a kind of a document management and document viewer program or software. So CCS has provided us with a large platform to work with in the future. We've only scratched the surface in terms of TimberScan, but we've paid for the software. We've paid for our users. And so all of these other functionalities that we're reviewing and we're considering implementing, for most of them, there's no additional cost as far as TimberScan goes. The only real cost, of course, is the labor or the man hours to implement it. And then, of course, a little bit of pushback from the business occasionally. In construction, we aren't a huge fan of change. And again, that's why I've been a huge proponent of CCS. Yes, the system's flexible. Yes, it's deep and it's wide, but in terms of functionality, but also the personnel I got to see, just a few minutes ago, I got to see Debbie on the screen here. And Debbie and I have worked together a lot, including occasionally in the evening. She's made herself available. CCS is people. And it sounds a little bit funny coming from an IT person, but CCS is people have made a big difference for me. Between Debbie and Jessica and Michelle and even Emily and Wade and all of these people, and many of which I haven't even mentioned, they're a differentiator. When you're, as I said, a small business, and you have to rely on those outside third-party resources sometimes in order to get from point A to point C. That's a big differentiator for me with CCS. So that's why we chose CCS a decade ago. We chose CCS again 2 years ago when we decided to streamline a process in not our general contracting division, but in our excavating division. Our excavating division is it's a little bit different, of course. Anyone who is in excavation or concrete or heavy highway knows it's different than general contracting in one very specific way, and that is that you've got a lot of large yellow equipment that you're tracking usage and time for. And so we had a time submission, daily report, reviewing and modification, and payroll entry process that was really pretty chaotic. And Stenstrom looked at the process, looked at what people were doing in the office. It was, for a while, it was even difficult to get the same answer twice to a single question. There was a lot of chaos. In fact, one person's primary job in this process was just to track down time. As we got timesheets in, as we got daily reports in, it was their job to straighten the time out so that our payroll clerk could key the time into Timberline. It was a pretty messy process. And so we started reviewing potential solutions about 4 years ago. In 2016, we reviewed 2 industry solutions other than core. And then we actually also talked with 2 software development companies about potentially building a customized solution from scratch, from the ground up. The customized softwares, the customized developers, they were intelligent, but it was a little bit out of our budget. And because, again, we're a smaller, that excavation division is a smaller division, sometimes you have to wing it a little bit. I understand in a larger company, you have people there who can say, we want X, Y, and Z as objectives, and here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 that's going to get us there. We're not really that size. As I said, sometimes we would get 2 different answers to the same question as we went to try and improve upon this process. And so that kind of wrangled or right away dismissed those developers that we talked with. The 2 industry solutions that we looked at, one was a bit smaller and a bit newer, and it hit the sweet spot as far as time submission goes, meaning filling out forms with your employee name, the name of your foreman, the job, the site you were on, how long you were on that site. But then right after that, it dropped off. It was really weak in terms of equipment. It was weak in terms of interfacing with Sage, which is, we use Sage 300. That's our ERP, or our accounting and costing and estimating software. And so it came down to Core and another company. And the other company was very much so, this is our system, this is how it works, and this is what your workflow will look like if you use our system. And for us, and I've seen this as common in the construction industry, for us, our history, and one of the things that we look at when we're implementing new systems that are going to affect business processes is we want a system that is going to accommodate our process, improve it, and increase the efficiency involved. We do not necessarily want to completely revolutionize the process, change it from top to bottom. As I mentioned earlier, in the construction industry, a lot of times you have people that have been with you for a long period of time, and they know their job. A lot of times they know their job better than their boss. And so we didn't want to take those people and ignore everything that they were saying. We wanted to work with someone that could customize their solution to improve on our process, to increase efficiency in the process, to systemize and proceduralize the process. And really, Core Cloud Solutions early on became the front runner in that. We initially talked with Core about implementing their solution with Core Cloud Solutions and using a combination of their daily report module, their employee timesheet module, and their payroll approval grid module. And the payroll approval grid looked like it would need some modifications, but it was about 75% of the way there, what we would need. The employee timesheet seemed a little, for us, what we needed, the customization, our objectives in terms of how we could potentially roll this out effectively, it seemed a little bit short. And then the payroll approval grid and was fine. The payroll approval grid, the daily report piece needed a little bit of work, but the payroll approval grid was very close. It was about 80%. So those are the three solutions that were initially proposed to us. After some back and forth and some creative discussion on the part of on Stenstrom's part, myself with my own supervisor and some of the key stakeholders here, we started looking at the e-forms piece. And the e-forms piece within Core Cloud Solutions is pretty great. In itself, it allows you to develop your own form that people fill out, route it as you would like, and then take that information, allow it to be approved, denied, pushed back to the person that originally filled out the form. But then in the end, when it's approved and you're done with it, it allows you to put it into a PDF, which then can be pushed into TimberScan and attached to certain records within Timberline. So that e-forms piece is great. But what we came up with was kind of an inventive solution of using that e-forms piece to create 3 different forms for time submission. Those time submission forms are, and this may mean nothing to you, but one for operators, one for our laborers that are on job sites without foremen, and then just a regular timesheet where you've got a foreman on the job site. So we created those 3 forms within e-forms. And Core, and this was all done in cooperation with Core, Core on their end customized their systems. So even though, and this is not a default functionality or feature set, this is something that Core accommodated us with. This was part of that customization piece that Gary was referring to. Core found a way to take all of those e-form information, all of those e-forms, the information, the data, and then push it into the daily reports automatically in most cases. The only time it's not automatic is when we said we want this to be a manual piece or a manual process. So our guys on site fill out an e-form, they click submit, that sends their daily time automatically into a daily report. Then the foreman reviews that daily report, makes any modifications, deletes or makes any additions, checks the notes, looks at, as I said, not just employee time, but equipment time as it's listed by employees. And once he's done, he clicks verify. And then it goes to the foreman's boss, the superintendent, and the superintendent reviews it again, looks at it, it does a once over. If there's no modifications, he clicks approve. While that verification and approval process is going on, you can actually see all of this time that's been submitted, and you can see its status as well, open, verified, or approved, in the payroll approval grid. And so once it shows as approved in the payroll approval grid, our payroll clerk knows this has been approved by the gentleman whose responsibility it is to ensure that the hours are correct, the job site is correct, the phasing or cost codes are correct. And then she clicks export. And when she clicks export, it pushes it into a CSV that she opens in Outlook. She has a macro that she clicks, and this is something that we did in addition to core just to make her job easier. She has a macro that she clicks, and it rearranges all the information so that she can go through and separate the hours within the spreadsheet, simply because we have to do a certified payroll within excavation, and we have to make sure the correct hours on the correct days, et cetera, et cetera. So she goes through that spreadsheet and makes modifications, and then she imports it into Timberline, looks at it, makes sure everything is good there, and then she runs payroll. I think my favorite part about this new solution, and it was, again, I think it's great that I tuned in a little bit early. And the reason is because, again, Debbie mentioned the reporting functionality. That's my favorite part about this entire solution is all of the data that's getting submitted, all of the hours on a basis of date range or a basis of job or employee or phase. All of that data, as long as it's marked reportable in those e-forms, is available through that reporting functionality that Debbie showed a little bit earlier. I think even though, and again, as I've said, the system runs deep and wide, but it does an excellent job at just tackling very specific pain points that you might have. That reporting functionality is something that we've used it here and there. We've got a handful of guys that use it, but that's my favorite piece, that simply because we haven't explored its full capabilities yet. I love the idea of being able to tear into that data a little bit. It's kind of like a up to date, as long as that timesheet has been turned in, we get a little bit of an up-to-date costing feature set out of that. We have one or two guys that have jobs that just run throughout the entire year. And so they use that every week. They pull data out, year-to-date data out, and push that into a spreadsheet and manipulate it. So I think that's probably my favorite feature. The other favorite feature I have of this system is just the digitization of daily reports. What 6 or 7 years ago was a paper process. Then we moved it into, we started pushing iPads out into the field. We moved it into spreadsheets. Now is completely digitized in a PDF. Our employees can go into TimberScan AIM and search for daily reports by job number, by date, by foreman. That's probably my other favorite piece. But the most satisfaction I got out of this entire process, and this is definitely what my boss and what the people in our excavation division, they cannot dispute this end result, is we reduced our office hours. The amount of time in the office that we had to put in to come up with certified payroll every week was reduced between 50 and 70 hours a week. And that's pretty intense. Literally, we've been able to take people who that's all they were doing in the past was working on certified payroll and site time and getting this process down, ensuring that the correct time was going to the correct phases, et cetera, et cetera. We had someone who did that full time. during our busy season. And now we've been able to take that person and push that person to other responsibilities. In addition to that, our payroll clerk has seen about 10 to 15 hours reduction, I would say, a week. And so that by far is the biggest accomplishment. For us to be able to reduce, just by streamlining the process and introducing CCS, we were able to greatly reduce the amount of man hours in the office to accomplish payroll in this division. If we weren't using CCS, I would say that we would likely be back to iPads and spreadsheets. And the problem with iPads and spreadsheets is that the data is static. The phasing, which changes on a job weekly, the employees, which coming and going, we may get 2 or 3 new site employees every week. The job numbers change every week as we win new jobs. Having to push out a new spreadsheet with all that new updated information every week is tough. But even tougher than that is getting the guys, the foremen on site, to use that new updated spreadsheet instead of just pulling the old spreadsheet. In addition to that, with this new system that we're using with CCS, we actually have all of our laborers on this system. And so it's not just a task for our foreman to fill out a daily report and all of his guys' time for every job that he was on. He's actually just opening a daily report where all of that time is already there. All of the notes are already there as they brought into the system by the guys on his crew. And he just makes modifications. And so this system is head and shoulders above what we were using before, which was just those, as I said, those spreadsheets. My suggestion, if you're thinking about using CCS, my suggestion is to just look at any process that involves printing or scanning documents. Anything that gets keyed in by your accounting department, those are the places to start, because it really is a way, it's another step. It's another step in that path of digitization that we really started with TimberScan, and we've continued on with Core Cloud Solutions. And so that's how I would view it, as an extension of that process. Emily, I know you wanted to take a few minutes for any potential questions or anything like that.
Yeah, there's a couple.
Okay.
Yeah, let me see if that one went into this folder. 1 second. Oh, that was actually a credit card one that came in at the same time. Okay. So how many POs does how many POs and timesheets does your company submit per month?
Boy, so I don't know the number of purchase orders because I'm not in accounting. In terms of timesheets, it depends. Obviously, in construction, the easy answer is it depends on the time of year because it's obviously seasonal. I don't know the exact amount of timesheets that are submitted. There are a couple ways to interpret that. Are we talking about time submissions per employee that feed into a daily report? Or are we talking about timesheets in terms of daily report on a per job basis? I can tell you that our company right now, in terms of timesheet volume, is really setting pace for Core. We are, I'm going to say easily in the thousands. If you're talking about just e-form timesheet submission.
Okay. I think you had mentioned your payroll team had significantly reduced their hours in the office processing
Yes.
payroll. I believe the question was trying to get at maybe how many employees payroll are they managing? And can you detail the process before CCS of how timesheets were submitted?
Okay, sure, yeah. So before we got into CCS, we were actually, as I mentioned, we were looking at a few different systems, and we trialed a few different systems. So before we actually ran in the field with a few foremen, we ran over the span of 2 years different systems that did not work for us. So before I even talk about those, what I'll do is I'll talk about before we started trialing these other systems. The process basically was we had superintendents that ensured or did their best to ensure. It was not a great process. It was not bulletproof. It was actually problematic. That they had a spreadsheet with updated phasing and jobs and employees, et cetera, that went to the foreman. The foreman then filled out these spreadsheets, which included entering in all of their crew members' information for all of the jobs that they were on during the day. And sometimes it was multiple jobs. Then those foremen would send that, and they would email those spreadsheets back to that superintendent. That superintendent would review, make any changes, and then he would print it out at the end of the day. And he would take that down to our expediter, and the expediter would then key that information in to a spreadsheet that she would keep throughout the week with all of those time submissions. And she would, with about 2 days left in the week, she would start going through that and looking at the information. If she saw a guy who somehow had, 16 hours in one day of time submitted, she would have to chase that down. If she knew, John Smith was on a job on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and she didn't see his time, maybe the foreman just forgot to include him, she would chase that down. If she saw conflicting information, Joe Anderson is showing his job on job A and on job B on Monday, she would have to go through and verify that. That's that position where we basically eliminated that entire problem. Then when she was done, though, she would send that spreadsheet where she had everything corrected to our payroll clerk. And our payroll clerk would then go through the spreadsheet. And the payroll clerk's job is completely different. There are obviously some nuances within the construction industry involving, unions, rate tables, locals, that sort of thing. And so what she would have to do is she would go through that spreadsheet then. And if she knew that Joe Smith was part of Local A, which had a special agreement for him getting the same rate in Geography 1 or Geography 2, she would have to fix that. If she knew that another employee had a special agreement regarding is it overtime pay on a per day basis or a per weekly basis, she would have to go through and resolve that. And she would go through and resolve all of those things in a spreadsheet. And then she would key it into her own spreadsheet where then she could go through and review all of that information now as it's corrected according to what she needed for keying it into Timberline. And she would change the information there to format it in a way, because now when she goes into Timberline, the way that Timberline does it by line, and then within a line, you can distribute a time allotment. You could say Joe Smith, worked 8 hours on this line, but 2 hours on Monday, 2 hours on Tuesday, 2 hours on Wednesday. She would go through and key it back in a way that made it really, really easy for her to, without doing any verification, just go from a spreadsheet and put it into Timberline. And so really where that payroll clerk's hours were reduced was with that export from the payroll approval grid, where everything was formatted in a way where she did not have to key it back in. she did not have to key. We removed that time of keying in. It removed that time of keying into the spreadsheet, but then also keying into Timberline. So now she just imports it into Timberline. And occasionally, you know, she does have to make some changes when it gets into Timberline. But because she's already gone through and done her own verification on the time, it's really that time, that keying in of time where she's saved so much.
Excellent. Awesome. Brian, thank you so much for coming today. I threw this other slide back up that has Brian's email address on it in case anybody wants to ask him a question offline. Feel free. He said it was okay, so I'm not surprising him. As you will notice, his face didn't change. His eyebrows didn't go up too high. But feel free to reach out to him if you have any questions about his experience implementing, how they're leveraging it today, what their future plans are for their solution. Because I know in the industry and in any business, things change frequently, and we try to be ready to adapt. So thank you for all the kind words too about our staff. Our